Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Audit and Governance Committee on Thursday, the 17th of October. I'm Councillor Marcus Andrews. I'm the chair of the committee. I'll be presiding this evening. Before we get into the agenda, can I go over to Democratic Services for the housekeeping rule?
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the chair. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the front car park of the building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum. Mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 1, apologies. Are there any apologies this evening?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Vicky Slade and Councillor Claire Waite, and substitute members, Councillor Tony Trent is here for Councillor Claire Waite.
Thank you. That deals with item 2. Item 3, can you advise me whether there have been any declarations of interest passed to you?
None received, Chair.
Okay, ask the committee and the independent members as to whether they've got any declarations to make here. If so, indicate. Councillor Tiling.
Yeah, just if we come on to anything to do with payroll, I have a close family member who is an employee of BCP and subject to payroll. So.
Thank you for that. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. Well, the minutes of the meeting we had on the 5th of September have been circulated with the agenda. What I would mention on that, item 31 in the agenda, I did say at the 25th of July Audit and Governance Committee meeting, there was a public question by Mr. McKinstry was raised. The second part of the question was as follows. Can you confirm the start and end dates for which management accounts were forwarded by Future Places to the Council, including dates of any hiatuses? These accounts were meant to be forwarded monthly under 3.1.1 of the shareholders' agreement. As the external auditor notes on page 50 of tonight's reports pack, that is reference the meeting back then, 25th of July, the company was acting in breach of that agreement. Now, the response given at that meeting was as follows. We were unable to ascertain specifics in regard to the management accounts question, as all staff involved in the process had since left the council and the company. As chair, I would like to offer an updated response and clarify details of the previous one. The earlier response was based on the fact that the finance officers responsible for preparing and reviewing the management accounts for Future Places Limited, both from the company and the council, had left their roles. After a comprehensive review of email records, no evidence to confirm that the management accounts were sent monthly to any council employee was operational. However, records of the monthly management accounts produced by Future Places Limited during the time of operation are retained. So with that, now like somebody to propose that we accept the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of September. Would I have a full proposal for that? Vice Chair, thank you. Councillor Torrey is seconding. So I will sign those minutes during the course of the meeting. Are they agreed? Any comment? Oh, Councillor Beasley.
Chairman, in the light of your statement a moment ago, until I've seen it corroborated, I think I'd prefer to abstain.
Okay, if you could note that, please. Thank you. Councillor Trent, of course, as you weren't there, yes, it would be difficult for you as you weren't present at the meeting. Okay, that's the minutes of the meeting agreed. Now, moving on to item 5, can I ask if any public issues have been received?
Thank you, Chair. We have one public statement from Mr Alex McKinstry in relation to agenda item 8 on risk management. Mr McKinstry, if you'd like to come forward.
Mr McKinstry, yes, you know the form. Over to you.
Okay, good evening, committee. Public statement relating to item 8, which is, of course, the risk management update. Leaks of exempt information should be added to the Council's risk register. There are several examples which I won't dilate upon due to purdah. The most notorious instance was the leak to the Echo concerning Wessex Fields for an article on the 29th of April. Not only did this relate to live commercial negotiations, it also threatened reputational damage to the Council through misrepresentation. The Echo stated, entirely wrongly, that Wessex Fields was being sold at a £4 million undervalue, and by the time that allegation had been removed from its online edition, it had been repeated on several websites and would even be repeated in Parliament. The risk is compounded by its intractability. Such leaks breach Part 4.1 of the Councillors' Code of Conduct, yet we know that several councillors are acting in complete contempt of the code, and I find this deplorable.
Okay, thank you for that. We're not under the Constitution able to discuss that statement. So we move, because there are no petitions or questions. No. Right. So we now move on to the proper items of business for this evening. Item 6, local audit in England backlog update. We're going to hear initially from our Chief Financial Officer, Adam Richins, but we also have Peter Barber from Grant Thornton online who will be commenting. But Mr. Richins, over to you initially.
Chair, I'll give a very brief introduction to this report before I pass over to Pete to probably deal with the substantive, which is his letter as attached to the main body, because I do know that you have quite a full agenda tonight. So just to remind the committee, on the 7th of March this year, the committee noted the intention of the external auditor to backstop our 22-23 accounts. The purpose of this report is just to bring members up with information, processes, legislation that has been passed since that March report, including identification that the deadline and for backstopping the 22-23 accounts is the 13th of December. The 23-24 accounts is the 28th of February next year. Chair, I think I'll pass over to Pete, who will talk you through his letter appended at Appendix C to the main report.
Mr. Barber, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. So, as the Director of Finance, my letter is at item 6, Appendix C, which I think starts on page 45 of your paper pack. And this is my letter to Adam as the Chief Finance Officer, dated the 7th of October, and it sets out, as trailed, our proposed way forward in applying the backstop to the Council's 22-23 financial statements. I'm conscious this has been well trailed and covered at a number of previous meetings of this committee, and this letter flows on nicely from Appendix A and B that Adam has referred to. So I will take the letter as read, and as I said, given the level of coverage in this area at previous meetings, I'm not minded to say anything else in terms of detail, other than it is our intention to bring the key outputs of our audit for 22-23 to the extra meeting of this committee that's been set in the diary for the 28th of November. And at that meeting, I will bring a high level 22-23 audit findings report. I will also include, importantly, a draft opinion narrative that will eventually find its way into your 22-23 financial statements. And importantly, that will include the narrative around the disclaimer. At that meeting, this committee will also be asked to approve the latest version of the 22-23 financial statements in order to enable me to issue that disclaimer opinion ahead of that deadline that Adam outlined of the 13th of December, recognising that having produced your 22-23 statements, we then subsequently concluded the 21-22 accounts that identified a number of issues that have then resulted in some changes to those 22-23 accounts. And as you all know, we are well progressed on the 23-24 accounts, and that has highlighted a number of issues that have resulted in some further minor adjustments to the 22-23 accounts. So that meeting at the end of November will give you an opportunity to see the latest version, along with the audit opinion with the backstop detailed in my report. So, Chair, that is all I wanted to add really to the item on the agenda. The only other thing probably worth saying is that you'll recall that when a decision was made in consultation with management to apply the backstop to 22-23, the main premise for that was to enable us to make a timely start on 23-24, and that continues to progress, and we will be providing an update on that progress to the next meeting on the 28th of November as well. So I'll stop there, but I'm happy to take any questions on the letter or the backstop.
Okay, I've got a question. It's something which I discussed with Mr. Standard at our pre-meeting. At the bottom of, I think, the second page of your letter, which is page 46 of the agenda, you say people have to find it. We'll keep you up to date on progress. People AG meeting is arranged in advance of the 23-24 backstop date of the 28th of February. You're recommending that there's a meeting in late January of next year. Now, we don't have a meeting in late January. We've got one in early January. And Mr. Stannard, I think you've looked at one option of possibly bringing the non-core meeting forward from February to accommodate Mr. Barber's request or suggestion that we do have a meeting in late January. Could you comment on that?
Yes, our Democratic Support colleagues are looking into rearranging that date along the lines of you. They're just reviewing the corporate calendar to make sure that there are no clashes. There is a proposal to have it on a Tuesday in late January. I can't remember the exact date. I think it might. Can I just double check that? I think it might be the 27th or 28th.
Yeah, you mentioned possibly moving it forward to Monday, the 27th of January. I raise it because you've read the Constitution for me.
Yeah.
That the Constitution says that I can agree a date of a new meeting, but as a scheduled meeting before I make that decision, which there is one now, I have to raise it with the committee for their views before I make that decision. So I would mention to the members of the committee, we're having this recommendation or advice from our auditor to have this meeting in late January, provided Democratic Services can clear that date for potentially Monday the 27th. Are you happy for me to confirm that? I might have to move the date one way or t'other, but certainly won't have it the weekend. Don't rest assured that. Yes, the Vice Chairman is nodding, everybody else is nodding. So if that could be noted by Democratic Services and Mr. Barber, so we can accommodate you. And if at the moment you could pencil in Monday, the 27th of January, that would be very useful. So I now throw it open to anybody who's got any questions or comments to make about this backstop arrangement. But essentially it is to note what's being advised to us. So, Vice Chairman.
Yep, I've got two questions. First to Mr. Barber. I'm mostly interested in the impact this has on the kind of go forward internal audit opinions. So what are the impacts, do you think, on this year's, and has it affected the starting position and your ability to do this year's and future years?
Through you, Chair, if I may. Yeah, very good question. So as a result of applying the backstop, or the intention to apply the backstop for 22-23, it does necessitate us to undertake further work in 23-24 over and above that we would do in a normal audit year. It's relatively limited, but will involve some additional work on some of the opening balances, particularly the split between usable and unusable reserves, particularly cash as well. Cash and bank is a particular area of focus. So we are incorporating those into our work that we're currently undertaking for 23-24, and remain on plan to get that work done ahead of that backstop date of the 28th of February 25 for 23-24. But importantly, clearly when I sign off any set of accounts, I indicate whether they present a true and fair view, not just for the disclosures in relation to the year in question, but the comparators as well. So there is a knock-on effect of issuing a disclaimer on 22-23, on 23-24, and potentially, for that matter, future years as well. So 23-24, assuming we get through it and we are comfortable with the disclosures, that will still result in a disclaimer opinion, where that disclaimer will reference the fact that I wasn't able to get assurance over the comparative information for the prior year. And that potentially has ramifications for future years as well, in terms of some of the notes that cover multiple years. Not sure if I've explained that well.
No, that was helpful. I suppose we'll pick that up as a committee when we read those disclaimers in time. I suppose it's one to keep an eye on. As to whether there are any that should have been found in that year, then affects future years. We'll have to be aware of that as a committee. The second question is probably an internal one. It's paragraph 10, the list of bullet points on the key points. The penultimate one says it should not be necessary for the audit of the previous year's accounts to be completed for Section 151 officers to comply with their responsibilities, as local bodies should have sufficient internal controls and processes to obtain that assurance. So this is just one internally, is do we feel that the internal controls and processes are adequate in the absence of that audit opinion? You feel comfortable that you can get the assurance you need?
Sorry, is that to me, Councillor?
Sorry, no, I think that's internal.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll take that question. It's almost impossible. If it was a normal year, I would be able to more certainly give that opinion. Obviously, I can't foresee the future, so we could do some audit work in this financial year, and then the 23-24 position is somewhat I can't. I'm not explaining it badly, but I can't foresee the future. So do our audit work and see where it leads us.
Chair, if I may just come in there at that point. Clearly, this is an assurance of the Section 151 officer. That's myself, and the reference and the work that Nigel does around that internal control environment that this committee sees on a regular basis is part of that process of giving me that level of assurance.
Okay, Councillor Trent, you indicated next.
And I think I'll apologise in advance for the question, because I've got in my head what a backstop is, but I can't relate it to accounts, and being a substitute member and being someone who's actually got no background in accounts or finance, and the sake of other people who may be also trying to sort of work out what it is. What is the backstop and what relevance has it got to what we're doing? Because I'm assuming the accounts weren't accepted, but I don't quite know how the backstop sort of works.
Councillor Trent, it's more to do with lack of auditing staff across the whole of the UK, as opposed to this particular council. All councils, or many councils, are having this process applied to them. And Mr. Barber, you may be able to confirm it. It's not just us. You may even want to put a number on it. Many other councils affected.
That's useful, because I thought it was something specific to this council that indicated that there was a problem with that year's accounts.
We are one of many councils who are having this backstop applied. Mr. Barber, I don't know whether you can, for Councillor Trent, and indeed some people who have just casually don't know the ins and outs and haven't been following other meetings, perhaps you could very briefly explain that this is not just affecting BCP Council.
Yeah, Chair, I can confirm that. So I think the backstop is best summarised by being described as a reset to ensure that the audit process is once again undertaken in a timely manner. Now, clearly, the activities of BCP that is funded through public monies, and it is important that there is accountability for that expenditure, and that is facilitated through the annual production of your statement of accounts that is required to be subject to audit. I think it probably started with the pandemic that exacerbated the challenge, combined with a number of other issues, including extra requirements on us as auditors to be more sceptical and challenge in more detail, that resulted in the audit process, and for that matter, the production of the accounts in the first place, taking significantly longer than it had done in prior years. And that has resulted in a position nationally across the sector where there are a very large number of prior year accounts outstanding. So you have the 22-23 accounts, but there are a small number of councils that I think have more than 5 years worth of accounts outstanding. And clearly it is very difficult for those councils to demonstrate accountability in terms of expenditure, but also in terms of when they, as part of the annual budget setting process or medium-term financial planning, being able to ensure that they are making decisions based on complete and accurate information, not least the opening position if the accounts aren't signed. So in order to enable the process to be caught up, the government, well, it's the prior government actually that's now been taken forward by the current government, have proposed the backstop. And what it does is sets a hard deadline of the 13th of December this year for any accounts from 22-23 and before to be concluded. If those accounts are not concluded and the auditor cannot give a clean opinion, then the auditor applies a backstop disclaimer opinion that says we cannot get assurance over the figures. And then that enables auditors with councils to make an early start on 23-24. Which is happening in most cases, although there are a number of councils that continue to struggle, and there are a number of councils out there that, as of today, have not produced their 23-24 accounts, and I suspect that they will be backstopped in 23-24 and possibly future years. So, thankfully, we're not in that position at BCP. We've made a really good start on 23-24, but the backstop for 22-23 is part of that national reset. And should enable us to provide assurances to you in terms of a clean opinion in a more timely manner going forward.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. I found that quite helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor BC, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. It probably isn't directly concerning the local authority backstop, but whilst Mr. Barber is online with us, I was very concerned about particular aspects of delay in terms of our audit, and specifically those concerning the correlation of being done with Dorset Council, most particularly the Dorset Pension Fund, where Deloitte's and Grant Thornton had to, I think, have a number of conversations. And I know I spoke to Dorset's 151 officer on a number of occasions as well whilst I was chairman. And those delays, I think, were predominantly around valuation of property and infrastructure investments. I think my question is lessons learned in the way that we can proceed in the future to streamline that work a little better. It may be helped by the fact that I believe Grant Thornton are going to be the external auditors for Dorset Council, taking over from Deloitte's. And I just wondered whether Mr. Barber could assure us that the kind of delays that we suffered and endured because of the Dorset County Pension Fund external auditors have to give us that assurance that we should perhaps expect a better and more timely performance in the future. Thank you, Chairman.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Beasley, through you, Chair. So just to be clear, we, Grant Thornton, have been appointed as the external auditors to both Dorset Council and Dorset Pension Fund with effect from 23-24. I am not in a position to give you an update on the position with regard to the 23-24 audits for the council, but I am taking a keen interest in how colleagues are progressing on the pension fund for 23-24, recognising I have written to them seeking a letter of assurance in relation to the IS 19 pension fund disclosure, and I am confident that that letter of assurance will be forthcoming in a timely manner to enable me to achieve the assurance I require, subject to their findings, ahead of the proposed backstop for 23-24.
Okay, Mr. Richards.
Chair, just to add a little bit of flavour to that, as a result of that process, I did issue a formal complaint to Deloitte's about the impact on the reputation of this council of their work in regards to that pension fund audit in question. I met with Deloitte's because they were part of a court on the local pension fund board, of which I'm a member recently, and I reminded them of their need to finalise and close down their complaint, because I still await a formal letter in response.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tully, you indicate, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the second page of Mr. Barber's letter, and about the disclaimer of opinion, I appreciate this is coming at the next meeting. This is to help us meet the backstop requirements. Please ensure you have and then there's 3 bullet points: adopted the financial statements in accordance with the requirements that sit for code, and met the requirements under legislation in terms of the rights of electors to inspect accounts, and set aside a date for Audit and Governance Committee. The date, is this the date we've just discussed? Fantastic. Okay, because it does say in advance of the 13th of December, but obviously this is probably, you know, on a more advanced one. So, regarding the other two, have we, you know, are we prepared? Can we, do we meet those conditions prior to our next meeting?
I look for guidance from the officers. You know, you've got some bullet points there, which are on page 46.
And just generally, do we have the resource? Yeah, is this requiring extra resource to meet this backstop audit?
Chair, yeah, I think you know, from an internal perspective, we are resourced to support and provide the external auditor with the information they require to meet those deadlines. And that is what our intention is. You know, you can never say never, because, you know, they could uncover something that, you know, we know we weren't anticipating, but generally in the past, and, you know, and we'll strive in the future to meet deadlines, as we have done, because I think as Pete Barber outlined earlier, we were one of the authorities that managed to publish our 23-24 accounts by the statutory deadline, and we will be endeavouring to make sure that we provided him with all the information needed so that he can complete the audit for 23-24 in a timely manner and in line with the information and deadline set out within this letter.
We do have a meeting in mid to late November as well to meet that 13th of December date.
And on the second point regarding electors, is that now publicly available?
Yeah, that's already taken place. That's already taken place.
Okay, Mr. Stannard.
Thank you. Could I just clarify what I responded to Councillor Connolly's question, please? What I said applies to should future backstops be applied. What I've already provided the committee and Chief Finance Officer with is my annual report that comes to this committee in July. So essentially in that report, I am reporting on the adequacy of the internal control environment. So the committee has already had some level of assurance from me around 21, 22, 22, 23 and 23, 24. But obviously if the backstop applies beyond that, that's where my previous answer kicks in.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, this report is basically to know we've given it an airing here this evening. So I think, you know, we'll accept the report and the comments. I think the only thing which I would ask Democratic Services to particularly report back on is when that date in January has been finalised, to let all the committee members, particularly the two people who aren't here this evening, know, so they can get it into their diary. Because it'd be good to have the committee here as opposed to substitutes appearing on that day. So that's item 6 dealt with. So we can move on to item 7, Treasury Management Monitoring Update for the quarter 2, 2024-2025. We've got Matt Filmer here, who's going to present his report. Over to you, Mr. Filmer.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee. So the report starts off with the usual economic update for the last quarter, which is somewhat out of date already. Hopefully people are aware of the latest inflation figures that came out this week. The September inflation CPI rate was 1.7%. That's the first time it's been below the Bank of England's 2% target in 3 years, which is positive for the council because we need to carry out a large amount of borrowing. So we want to see interest rates drop so that we can carry out borrowing at a cheaper rate. However, it's not quite as simple as that. So the council predominantly gets its borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board, which is part of the HM Treasury. And we borrow from PWLB, and the rates we borrow based on the gilts market, and gilts are government debt. They package up and sell to the market. And that's a separate market in itself. And the prevailing rate of that determines the rate in which we borrow at on that day. It changes twice in the day. And what we found with the gilt market is it's actually increased. So although interest rates are seeing to come down over the next year, and that's how the economic forecasts see that, gilts have gone up because there's no market about the budget that's expected on the 30th of October. So there's a bit of wariness about where the new government will take the economy. So they're holding back, which means the gilt market is high at the moment. So moving to the latest forecast in terms of the Treasury management function, fortunately we're forecasting an additional pressure from where we were last quarter. So at last quarter update, I reported that we were going to be overspent by just shy of 1.5 million, and that's now risen to 2.4 million. Now, in part, that's because we've had to carry out more borrowing than what we were expecting back in quarter 1. And as you'll see on table 4, some of that borrowing is now taken us into the next financial year. And the idea with that is to take some of the risk off the table, because where we do a lot of our temporary borrowing is through other local authorities, and we're seeing that the level of cash available in that market is depleting. So we're trying to take some of the risk off. Unfortunately, that means it comes at a higher cost because we're borrowing it for a longer period of time. And I think it's fair to say there was a bit of optimum bias in terms of our forecast back in quarter 1. We had expected rates to drop sooner than what's actually happened, and then that's played into the cost of borrowing as well. So table 4, as I mentioned, sets out the council's total borrowings as at the end of September, and you'll see at the very top of that table that stands at 52 million. And we're expecting probably to borrow on top of that another 50 million by year end to manage our cash position. I do want to highlight at the bottom of that table 4, there's the Phoenix Life loan that we took out a number of years ago prior to local government reorganisation. And during September, we restructured that loan. It was originally at a 2.83% rate on what they refer to as an annuity basis. So that's almost sort of like a mortgage in terms of paying off your principal. And we've restructured that to an equal instalment of principal loan at 2.25%. The good news of that is it means we'll repay the loan sooner by around 14 years. And on a pure cash basis, we'll save £19 million compared to the previous loan. And just to finish up, table 5 shows our investments as at the end of September, which stood at 14.6 million. So I'll stop there, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got here this evening, I haven't brought him in earlier, Councillor Mark Cox, portfolio holder for finance. I don't know whether you've got any comments or questions to start off with.
And just actually a question for Matt, if you don't mind. Chair, and that was to do with what we were just talking about with the gilts. Presumably, once the budget's over and done with and everybody's settled down, presumably you expect the interest rate to settle down and go down with the rest of the market. You would hope.
Through you, Chair, we would expect that, although previous governments that hasn't always worked out, depending how the market reacts to the announcements.
Yeah. And then this is tongue in cheek, but the £19 million you've just saved, we can't capitalise that in next year, can we? No. It's worth a try. Thank you.
Yes, some at the market, but not all of them. Any questions or comments about the report? This is obviously a quarterly report.
Just out of curiosity, what happened after the mini budget in 2022? Is there a way of kind of quantifying the impact of that on the balance sheet? That's probably not a reasonable question to answer right now, but it'd be interesting to find out what happened to the gilt market as a direct consequence of that, and what the impact.
Had some effect.
Presumably, you're able to quantify.
Mr. Phil, you want to look back on that? I don't know.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Prior to that budget announcement back in 2022, we'd taken out some borrowing from PWLB, and that was at a historic low rate of 1.55%. And I think shortly after that budget announcement, rates shot up probably over 5% from memory. I mean, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but that shows you the swing that we saw in a very short period of time.
My probably fairer question is, could you talk a little bit about how this links to what we've been hearing about the impacts of the DSG problem? I know that's been talked about in separate papers, and that being an issue coming up. How does that kind of fit into this?
Chair, if I can probably come and have an attempt to answer that question. For those who aren't aware of those other conversations, the other conversations reflect on our position with regards to the high needs budget. And I think, as I probably outlined to Councillor earlier in the week, with regards to our high needs budget, the government give us £62.3 million a year to fund special education needs and disability service, which is part of that DSG budget. We originally budgeted to spend £28 million over that authorised £62.3 million in the original budget. And Council earlier in this week agreed that we would overspend by £16.5 million. So overall, we're spending £44.5 million more than the government grant available to us. Overall, that means we're spending about 71% more than we should be, as part of that process. Now, invariably, that means that cost has to be funded, and we have to find the cash to make those payments. So inevitably, it has an impact on the cash flow forecast that Matt and his team are doing to drive this Treasury position. So, way back in February, he would have been alert to the £28 million overspend, but he wouldn't have been aware of the £16.5 million. And that has a significant impact on the cash available to us, and therefore the cash of which we're potentially generating interest on. So it is a key ingredient, but only one of many other ingredients as part of that Treasury forecast for this year. Other ingredients will be things like, we were expecting that the interest rates to come down, and as Matt said, they've not come down, probably on the trajectory that we were assuming way back in February.
Councillor Cox.
Good question, and I'm very interested to carry that one on, if you don't mind. Matt was just sort of saying that we've going to borrow another 50 million. And yet we've been told we can't borrow to use on our services. So where do we draw the line when we say that's for services, that's for something else? Presumably you have a schedule of that £50 million as to what it's being borrowed for, and presumably it's not services.
Yes, borrowing is purely for our cash management purposes. When when Adam refers to the sort of cap in terms of what we can do in terms of borrowing is referred to as the capital financing requirement, which we can only borrow for capital purposes. And so we're expecting next year to breach that cap in terms of our forecast for cash, where the borrowing will be over our capital financing requirement. And then that's when we're borrowing for revenue purposes, which is in breach of our prudential code.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got nobody else in.
Got a question for you, Matt, about the investments. So point 14 on your report. I'm just wondering how we perform, how are they performing, and how do we make a decision as a council in terms of where we place our investment portfolios?
Through you, Chair. So every year we set the Treasury Management Strategy, which goes to full council as part of the budget setting. And within that is an investment strategy, and that determines which we call them counterparties or banks or however you want to term them, that we can invest with. And those counterparties have to be risk assessed independently, and we use the highest risk rating, which is known as a AAA rated investment, which is, it's not risk free, but it's certainly one of the most safest investments that we could utilize. And the ones that you see there, the liquidity funds, are all AAA rated liquidity funds, and they meet that investment strategy. In terms of performance of those funds, they tend to mirror the Bank of England rate mostly. So you'll see they're achieving around 5%, which is in line with the Bank of England rate. If their returns fall, we've got other capacity and other investments to move the money on to meet those counterparty limits in terms of their risk rating.
Yeah,
thank you. As Treasury Management investment policy, do we have an ethics policy as well? And do we know exactly where in terms of those investments, do we know what kind of investments they're also investing in?
Through you, Chair, we don't have an ethical policy in terms of investments. It's mentioned in the Treasury strategy, but when we look at Treasury investments at this council, and for any council, they need to focus on prioritising security, liquidity and yield. And what we found with some of the more ethical investment products, or the sort of green products that exist, they don't necessarily offer the best return compared to other investment products, and sometimes they carry more risk. And so we always look for security, liquidity and yield with our investments.
So on the back of that, if we wanted to do something like invest in seed finance in local businesses or something like that, what would prohibit that in terms of what we're restricted in being able to do in investing? Again, that's on the spot. It's just I thought it was a good question.
At the end of the day, I think as Matt's tried to stress, is that this committee will review on an annual basis the Treasury Management Strategy and Treasury Management Policy. So it is something that is scrutinised committee before you are considered whether or not you'll recommend it to council. Clearly, our focus is got to be on looking after council taxpayers' money. It's hard earned, and we need to make sure, as Matt said, that we protect it by way of security, liquidity and yield. And therefore, if members wanted to take risk with that money, that is something that would need to be considered really, really carefully, because I think we start to consider non-traditional approaches to local government that Mike is not particularly keen on.
Just to be clear, I'm not proposing that. I'm just interested in what the restrictions are within what our investments can be.
Okay, thank you for that. Obviously, your next. Oh, Councillor Tarling, sorry.
Yeah, just for clarity, so we're not going to be investing in any retail parks in Bournemouth, picking up from Councillor Colney's comments.
If you want to answer that one.
Yeah, that is not part of the treasury management strategy.
At your next quarterly report, it would be interesting if you could just have a short paragraph reflecting upon, and it would be a couple of post budget, as to a reflection on what did happen, as it were, because you can now reflect on it, and because people are interested. And indeed, hey, you know, there may be a summer mini budget for all we know, but it would be useful to see what happens. So this is a quarterly report. It's to know. It's not to make a decision. So, you know, we note the report, and thank you, Mr. Filmer, for all the time and effort that you put in to preparing it. So we're moving now on to item 8, which is another quarterly report. It's risk management, corporate risk register update. There are 2 main updates which we've got to note, which are against some bullet points in the agenda, and we have Fiona Manton joining us online. So Fiona, if you're there, if you could present your report to us, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening. This is the quarterly update to the Committee of the Council's Corporate Risk Register. As part of the continuing development risk management and the reporting of risk management, to assist members this quarter, I've included a summarised version of the risk management process we follow. This is included as Appendix 1 on page 65 of the report. To support members further, the approach of the Council is outlined in Appendix 2 on page 67. I've included the Council's risk matrix and the definitions relating to the quantification of risk. The matrix that we use is a 4x4 matrix currently, where risks are mapped and assessed in terms of both the likelihood and the impact. The basis of the assessment in terms of impact is provided by the definitions outlined on page 68 of the report, with the likelihood being outlined on page 69. The assessment, you'll note, is based on 7 possible aspects of the risk and encourages factors other than financial risk to be considered to ensure the full implications of the risks are understood and evaluated. In addition to these documents, to continue to assist members, I wanted to provide the background around the approach to risk management and the quarterly process we follow. So just to outline, each of the corporate risks are owned or have the oversight of a corporate director. Each quarter, each risk is reviewed in terms of the criteria, which includes items such as, does the risk title best describe the risk? Are there any additional mitigations to note? What future key actions are planned? What changes are there to any risk scoring? And are there any other or relevant changes to the overall risk strategy in terms of the treatment of the risk? My role in terms of the corporate risk register is to collate the updates and report on the risk register. The format of the reporting has been developed over time, and we adjust it in accordance with any feedback we receive, either from officers or this committee. And these adjustments will continue to ensure that we are flexibly and dynamically reporting on risk. Always happy to receive feedback and adjust the style if it provides any assistance to members or officers. The register you see here today represents the top level of risk for the organisation and sits at the top of the risk pyramid. By this, I mean that below this, there are other risk registers, such as the key assurance risk registers, directorate, project, and in some instances, team risk registers. On the completion of the quarterly reporting cycle, the corporate risks are routinely shared with the risk champions in each directorate, and they use this to inform the reviews of their own directorate risk registers so that we have an up and down process in terms of risk consideration. Directorate risk registers are also reviewed by CMB as part of the quarterly review process to ensure that there's oversight of any risks that might need to be escalated, and also on an ad hoc basis, directors can nominate risks to be considered as corporate risks and be presented to CMB. This is an ongoing and dynamic process, and risk management continues to develop, and both the review process and reporting will continue to evolve to ensure it remains fit for purpose for the organisation. At Appendix 3 of this report on page 71, a dashboard is provided, which includes a snapshot of information on the corporate risk register. It shows the current corporate risks, the risk lead, and the movement scores in the last 12 months. In relation to this particular quarter, the updates are summarised, or the material updates are summarised in paragraph 10 of the report, and the material changes this time round are in relation to CRO 8. We may fail to run an open and fair a fair and open election stroke referendum. We've removed this risk from the corporate risk register, and as usual, it will now be placed on the director level risk register, and be reviewed routinely and escalated as necessary again in the future. In relation to risk CR15, we may fail to have in place suitable talent attraction, retention and succession planning, staff wellbeing and support. At the last meeting, this committee, a question was raised about recruitment and retention in areas of the authority, and within the update, we've provided a response to that question. A new risk has been added this quarter, risk CR26, risks associated with the availability of general artificial intelligence. This is very much new technology and an evolving position, and it's appropriate to include this at this time whilst we understand the full implications of the technology and how they may impact the operations of the council. In relation to risk CR16, we may fail to secure or manage partnerships, miss out on associated funding and be unable to deliver services to communities. At the last meeting of the committee, members asked for the risk owner to attend and provide further information on this risk. I believe Ida Reynolds is here with us today online and is able to provide a short briefing on this particular risk and respond to any questions that members might have. If it's appropriate, Chair, I'd pause there and let Isla provide that update.
Yes, that'd be excellent if you could join us, please. Thank you. Ms Reynolds.
Good evening, committee. So this is a general risk, which is a corporate that looks across all partnerships. So it's partnerships with other organisations and communities. I would say it's definitely in its kind of infancy in terms of our understanding of it. We have at the moment a couple of vacancies in our policy team, which means we've not been able to kind of get a grip of this risk as much as we would like, and we have an action coming up to have a look at this risk in particular and really understand to update the register that we already have in place, but to update that register, do some communications around it to services to make sure that that register is updated, and then there's a wider corporate ambition that we have to really understand the risk and probably reiterate what it is once we know where we are. So it's very, very early stages, I'm afraid, for this one.
Okay, thank you. Fiona, do you want to come back or round up your presentation?
No, I'm happy to continue if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah, carry on, please.
Thank you. So the corporate risk register more generally is shown at Appendix 4 in terms of your report. That's page 73. As usual, this is a snapshot in time, as obviously the register is dynamic and subject to change, with new risks being considered and allocated across various levels of the organisation continually. In terms of the continuing development of risk management, the process of developing a new risk management policy continues, and this draws on best practice. The development of this policy will ensure that the council's risk appetite and risk tolerance are clearly articulated. Work to progress is nearing completion. The team continues to monitor and circulate risk information as set out on paragraph 26 on page 62 of the report, and we're, as mentioned in the report, we're just starting out on a review and a risk maturity exercise, which we will bring back to this committee at probably the next meeting. Thank you again for the opportunity to present my report, and I'm happy to assist where I can if there are any questions.
Thank you. Presentation, Councillor Tarling, you're first.
Yeah, thank you. I've got two quite separate questions. One, and hopefully indulge my rather parochial approach, but one of my electors has actually raised this, and that was the risk management of breaches in confidence, is bottom of the statements, and reputational damage linked to breaches of commercially sensitive information by councillors. And just to ask Mr. Manton whether that actually has been considered as a risk, and which group of risks that's actually contained in.
Would you like to respond to that one first, Fiona?
I think I'd like to take away and have a look at that one and respond separately, if I may. Thank you.
Okay, well,
Yeah, that's fine. I appreciate it. It's somewhat been dropped in, so that's fine. I'm assuming it probably comes to the monitoring officer as well to pick that up. So just ask that that is actually considered and does form part of our risk management strategy. It's maybe not a big financial risk, but if it's going to go in the echo, I think it is a risk. My second one was just about generative AI and CR26 as the new one. I noticed many of the risks have stayed the same. Their position, their up and down arrows. I couldn't find one that's moved significantly up and down unless I've missed something in your paper you presented. But I am slightly concerned. I actually spent a bit of time in the office in this building probably a couple of months ago, and sitting next to in the IT team showed me what a wonderful thing generative AI is. And I'm slightly worried about intelligence, especially when it comes towards members, especially not pointing fingers at officers, but certainly members. And I'm sort of wondering whether I believe the app is available. There's apparently an app in some of the applications we've got on our laptops here for artificial intelligence. And I'm just concerned that perhaps if we press the button on our laptops, the AI button, that we might generate some unwanted intelligence in the members of the council, maybe some training for members would be a way to mitigate that.
okay, Fiona, it's
That's
probably
actually a serious question. I know.
monitoring officer, sorry.
Chair, I think that it may be more appropriate for me around addressing the member training element. That is something, Chair, that I can pick up either through the standards committee who look at the training programme for all BCP councillors. And I'm quite happy to work with perhaps Sarah Chamberlain, Director of IT, and we can add that to the programme of training and perhaps put something on the members portal that you all have access to. So I'm happy to pick that up, Chair, in terms of member development going forward.
If you could, that would be useful, I think, for all members. Councillor Phipps.
I'd just like to, I suppose, mention it's CR18, failure to provide adequate customer interfaces. I have to say I'm quite surprised that that movement during the quarter is still no movement, because certainly my perception and the amount of emails and contact I'm getting from residents is that the new website and things that are going on with the customer interface is not working well at all. So I'm extremely surprised that that apparently is okay or the same as it was before. I'm looking at the risk impacts there, which is on page 102. Call answering performance that does not meet customer expectations. Well, I get a lot of residents, certainly throughout the last month, that say they might get through on the phone, but then they try to put through to somewhere and they just don't get anywhere, or they get cut off, or they have to wait for 10, 15 minutes and then they give up. And that happens a lot. So I think, in my opinion, things have gone downhill there, which makes me surprised that you've got the level playing field here. And a lot of it is the same with the website, that they can't find anything. You put something in the search and what comes up is a list of things, but it's not actually what you're looking for. Or there's nothing on the homepage either about how to get committees and agendas or anything like that. I think you have to go through democracy and nobody knows that they've got to do that. It's a bit of a mess, really, in my view. And this is a personal thing that I'm finding, and a lot of my residents are finding as well. So, how did you come up with the fact, I don't really even answer this one, that this hasn't worsened at all and it is actually the same as last time? Can you just give me a bit more information on it, please?
Fiona, did you want to pass comment?
Thank you. Yes, Chair. Obviously, the quarterly update is provided there, which sets out the work that's going on in terms of the introduction of new functionality, etc. What I can do is take away and have a conversation with the risk lead on this one, and perhaps feedback on the particular points that you've raised, Councillor. I think that's probably the most helpful thing I can do in terms of responding to the risk.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you could, because I, from a personal level, I find it easier to search our website by going through Google as opposed to the search facility on our website. It comes up with the answer quicker. I've got Councillor Trent indicating next.
Just
Oh, do you want to come back?
quickly
Yeah,
come
sorry.
back just to say that I did actually email the director at the beginning of the week. Well, it's Thursday now, and I haven't had a reply yet. So that's another thing. You don't seem to get replies very quickly. Something else.
Okay, noted. Councillor Trent.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I echo a lot of what the last speaker has mentioned. I would say it's pretty close to the top of my inbox. Problems with the council's services or the lack of being able to find something, and I've experienced it myself. And actually, when the fingers were pointing and saying, "Oh, you're just getting on a bit. You don't really know what's going on," an officer checked it out in the frontline services and confirmed exactly the problem I had, because it would appear that our IT systems at the moment can have multiple interfaces. It almost depends on where you access it from. Some people can access things with no problems at all and it connects. Other people, it goes through a different avenue. It's almost like going back to the days when you had 2 or 3 sort of systems, so basic systems on computers. I've forgot the terminology for it. But if you went through the wrong one, in fact, if you went through different ones, you got an entirely different website. That is tending to happen on the council's website, and it's not even sort of old systems or new systems or anything like that. It's almost random as to what you get when you go into it. But the one thing, and it is going to be discussed by the Overview and Scrutiny Board next week, is there's one area within which the sort of council was performing well within the government targets. It was exceeding government targets by about a third. And suddenly we started falling behind the government target on this particular service by quite a significant amount. And it turned out that it was to do with not having adequate frontline staff dealing with it and not being able to backfill a position when someone was off on long-term sickness. And personally, and I think it is referred to in one of the risks anyway, I think that is quite a high risk, because as soon as you aren't able to maintain a service level, and this service level was, as I say, exceeding government targets, so it was actually running quite well. If that happens in multiple areas, then straight away you're developing a higher risk. You're getting more complaints, you're getting more people getting in touch with more people and more councillors, and there's it increases the workload quite massively. And I would have thought that that's actually quite a significant risk to the performance of the council and ultimately the financial side of it, because if you're not actually delivering the service, and it's something which a while back it was improving, but it's almost as if, and I raised this at the last Overview and Scrutiny Board, it's almost as if we've made too many of the wrong people redundant. And I do think it's a risk that we don't maintain the level of service that people expect and that we expect. And I would put that quite high up on the risk factor. And you've only got to add to that an IT failure, and then we really would be in difficulty. So just really making that point that we do have an issue there in the background that we do need to address. And I do put it as quite a significant risk if we don't overcome it.
Thank you. Your point's been noted by Fiona. Lindy Johnson van Vuren, you're indicated next one, or independent members.
Thank you, Chief. On page 79 and 120, the quarterly update and direction of travel was omitted. And page 93, 116 and 129, the direction of travel was omitted, just to note. Then I've got a question on the risk management policy. In the risk management policy, paragraph 5.1.1, it states that the audit committee needs to note the risk management policy on an annual basis. So taking that one into account, and also the risk management framework, the risk management policy of BCP refers to a risk management framework, as well as a risk management strategy, which is referred to in the internal audit charter. I would just like to know when these three documents would come to this committee for noting.
Fiona, I don't know whether you can help us now, or perhaps you may need to investigate and particularly come back to the independent member with her query.
Yes, certainly. I'll certainly come back with a definite response separately to the independent member, but the intention will be to bring these documents to the committee as soon as possible. We're working on them currently, so I would hope it would be in either the next cycle or definitely the cycle after that.
Mr. Stella, do you want to comment on that?
Just to be clear, members, what Fiona is referring to is the new version of the strategy. Clearly, we have a live version of the strategy. It's on the council's website and intranet under the big list of policies under risk management. And obviously that was reviewed by this committee when it was implemented 3.5 years ago now. Yeah, but I can give Lindy the link to that if you want to see it.
Yeah, it'd be useful, Lindy.
I believe these documents should be reviewed on an annual basis by this committee, not
I would take professional advice on that.
We can take your observations in mind. You know, it's I guess it's the business of the committee. What can we get through? You know, there's an awful lot of policies to get through. You know, we did the ones that we review currently. There's 5 currently, but obviously we can take. I could consult Councillor Andrews and see if they want to review. The committee wants to review it on an annual basis.
You could investigate.
Chairperson, the policy of BCP says it should be reviewed annually by this committee. So then if you don't want to review it annually, then you need to change the policy because we're not complying currently.
Okay. Mr. Stanley, if you could take that back and discuss it internally, and perhaps discussion with me and the Vice Chair about that. Councillor Beasley, you indicated next.
Thank you, Chairman. I have 3 items I'd like to speak on. The first one is about risk CR23, which is the dedicated schools grant deficit. In reading that, I just wonder.
Could you indicate which page that is on so members can catch up?
Page is 81.
Thank you.
And I wonder, given the comments that we've had, especially those more recently, both from the portfolio holder for resources and indeed for the head of finance, whether we should perhaps expand the narrative a little bit around the implications of the risk. Because it does seem to me that this is a fairly anodyne version of what we're hearing currently, and that I don't think it probably fully reflects the enormity and the growing enormity of the risk this council faces. So I just think it's a matter of trying to perhaps add a further paragraph into it to update it, but I don't think it's doing quite the job we might expect in the risk register the way it's couched at the moment.
Mr. Richards.
Chair, I think that's a fair comment. It's something that we can reflect on for the next version of this report.
Okay, you have another point, Mr. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chairman. The second one is just, I'm afraid, to go back to this discussion about CR18 customer interfaces, and it's really the headline of this, We have discussed this before, Chairman, and we've, I think, across members from all parties had the same sort of criticisms before. I note very carefully what Councillor Phipps was saying. It reflects some of the things I think I've said previously, both here and in overview and scrutiny. The system is failing us because we know that through how much it's failing our residents and the feedback that we get. And I concur with the point you made just now. Quite often I will use Google to get into the council rather than going directly into the council itself. That must tell a bit of a story, surely, that it's inadequate at the moment and it is not doing what it should. And we've given it, I think, enough time. We've given it a lot of time. We've certainly not spared any financial resource to try and improve it as a council. And it is the point of entry for all of our residents and all of our businesses when they want to get something done. And I think what I've suggested before is that it would be time well spent if some councillors were able to sit down with whoever the officers are who determine how this works and demonstrate to them where it is failing. Because at the moment, it's clear to me that there seems to be an attitude that it's as good as it can be. Well, it's not. So I think coming out of this risk, we really should be expecting to see some action. And I think that Councillor Phipps is absolutely right that the movement in the quarter is not static in practice.
Thank you for that. I would just mention something which I probably on a daily basis check. It's the planning website of this council, planning records, and we still have 3 separate portals, one for Christchurch Borough, one Poole Borough, Bournemouth, effectively. And the Poole one is the best. Luckily, if your property's in the Poole patch, is easy to find documents. But Dorset Council has amalgamated several different local authorities' planning databases into one seamless thing, and Dorset did it. And I would ask through Fiona that we talked to Dorset to see how they were able to do it, and those planning things need to be amalgamated into one search facility. Councillor Tarley.
Yeah, I've got to thank all the other members on this committee. Literally have hit every button tonight, and I've got to remind people on my declaration of interest, I actually get to speak to a member of BCP customer services every evening, and I get half an hour about customer services every evening. So if you think you've got it bad, I get it pretty much every day. I would say though, regarding I'm fairly IT literate, and I've literally just gone on to the thing, and it doesn't take me long to find it on my phone. I'm glad the website is optimized for mobile devices, but I appreciate it doesn't work for everybody. However, when we harmonized in part of the transformation, one of the things that has been done is harmonization of our front websites. We were all asked as councillors to have a look through, check, and there's a broken link button on the website. So I haven't looked just now, but we were asked to actually have a look at it, and I would encourage councillors to when they find broken links to report it to our IT services, because every pair of eyes is useful in this. And maybe Councillor Phipps and Councillor Trent, now Councillor Beasley's also put his hand up, which is great, would like to offer themselves as guinea pigs, and I think that's a fantastic idea. Councillor Beasley, either yourself or nominate another guinea pig to sit with IT and demonstrate exactly that, because I completely agree. That's a great thing. Regarding the planning websites, I sit, as you know, on one of the planning committees, and that is actually in train to harmonise all the things. And I've been told that we're not having the Bournemouth planning portal layout, which pleases me greatly, because it's then got the it's got a sensible numbering scheme for planning applications. Thank you.
Councillor Beasley, I think you had a third point, but I got the Chief Executive, Graham Farrell, indicating. So, will you?
Shall I deal with my third point?
Do your third point,
properly, so that we're all in the same place. I didn't realise that we had an inside track with Councillor Tarling. That's very encouraging.
Graham, do you want to comment?
Thanks, Jim. Sorry about that. I just lost the sound for a minute as it was coming through. It was only just really to pick up a couple of the comments. And I would suggest perhaps Sarah Chamberlain, as new director of IT, could talk about the website and where we are. And perhaps Matty Radsup to talk about the customer angle. We have taken over the last 3 years quite a lot of resource out of the customer interface. We have made some significant savings in there, but we have got a new system in, a new customer relationship management system in. I think it might be useful for a small group of members, but to sit down with them and, as you say, identify where you're still finding the problems, and let's see how we can tackle those. With regard to the planning system, I was just going to reflect, as Councillor Tarling just has, I think that there is a new system, a single system for the whole of the BCP area, which has been slightly delayed in implementation, but is due to come in before the end of this financial year. There's a lot of work had to be done on cleaning up the data from the previous systems in order to make it able to be transferred into the system. But I say that system is due to be up and running early in 2025 with full implementation by the end of the financial year, so that all new applications and all historical data should be on a single system using a single portal, which has the advantage that A, all customers will get the same, hopefully high quality service, but B, we can also flex the planning officers, because at the moment, if they use the Christchurch system, for example, they can't necessarily use the Paul system because it's a different way of working. So this will be a single system for all planning officers by the end of March 25.
It will help our own officers with their job. Yeah. Councillor Beeson. Sorry. Sorry, we're having an IT issue here with one of the microphones.
Hope it didn't upload us.
You try with that other microphone, so we may have to.
Is that any better, Chairman? I'm not sure what caused that. So my third point was to follow on from Councillor Tarling's suggestion around the risk implications of confidential information. And I think that the officers said they'd come back to that at a later time rather than responding tonight, and that's fine. But I thought at the same time, could they expand that, please, to look at the issue of confidentiality settlement agreements that may have been entered into by this council, the risks around those, and indeed the cost implications, and perhaps to add to that in this period of change and redundancy that we're experiencing through transformation, that they look also to include within that same risk the issue of industrial tribunal challenge and cost as well, wrap the whole thing up together, because I think there are a lot of issues in there of which most, if not all, councillors are unaware, and that they need to be brought out. Because if we are carrying other risks, if other things are happening that we are unaware of that could lead to further financial implications, then that is a way of dealing with it in a contained way. But if we're not doing it at the moment, then it's my belief that we should be. And I think it links in very carefully with what Councillor Tarling has said, and may help us to understand better the risks, the alleged risks that we have seen in the statement from a member of the public earlier this evening.
Thank you for that. Corey, and we'll move on after that.
Two hopefully quick questions. First one, I support. I'd be very grateful if at the next meeting we could have an update to the point raised by two councillors about the risk around leaks. That would be helpful to discuss next meeting. But it made me think that part of the broader risk around the example given in the public statement, it speaks to the risks around asset sales more broadly, because this is so important. It's such a critical part of the savings needed and the council's finances. I wonder if there is a wider risk there around the risks associated with asset sales and valuations not being what we'd want or expect, various risks around that. Do you think that they're adequately captured within one of the others? So, for example, the one related to managing the MTFP. Do you think that you're comfortable that the risk around the asset disposal program is sufficiently captured by the existing risks?
May not have the answer this evening, but Mr. Richards.
Yeah, and my answer probably won't be a proper response, but it's just to highlight that I think at the next meeting of this committee, as one of your deep dive sessions, will be an update on our asset disposal process, and if you like, the steps we've taken to strengthen that process through learning, through external challenge and observations over the last few years. So I think it just hopefully will help demonstrate to the committee about what we do to make sure that actually we go through robust governance processes and sales processes regards to any asset sale. So that will think we will be a part of that next meeting. With regards to some of the other risks, I just recognise that some of these issues are reflected in the council statement of accounts, where we have a statutory disclosure requirement. And with regards to some of those other risks, there is a stage where it gets to a level of significance, which will be something that I will draw to council's attention as part of my annual Section 25 report that accompanies any budget that you are asked to consider. So it's just recognising those issues, all are part of the matrix that help you consider and address these issues.
I had one quick further one. It's on CR26, the generative AI one. I was a bit surprised at the high scoring it got based on my understanding of what the council was using. But I see that there's the plan to develop a Gen AI strategy document. I assume the thinking is to score it potentially quite high, and then hopefully that strategy document and the mitigations will bring it down. Do you know what the plan is for the governance around that strategy document? Appreciate it might be a bit early to let us know.
Anybody wanting to respond on that? Oh, sorry, Fiona.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I think it is very much in its infancy, but I think that's why we want to get it onto the risk register and have the opportunity to, as you say, start it high and utilise the risk mechanism to make sure that we are identifying all aspects of risks that this brings, along with the benefits, and making sure that we weigh the two up. In terms of the governance arrangements, I know there is development of a strategy underway, so I can certainly find out where we are with that and provide an update.
Oh, Councillor Armstrong.
Apologies for interrupting, but we can't hear, I'm afraid.
You try another microphone. We're just going to check the connection. I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yeah.
We're just going to check all the plugs for the microphone, so we're just going to go offline for 30 seconds or a minute. Okay, sorry about that, Jim. We've got all the plugs pushed in properly, so I think people can be heard. Councillor Armstrong, can you start again?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being so patient. I just wanted to pull us back slightly to CR 23, the risk with regards to dedicated school grant, and to pick up and explore a little bit further about the points that Councillor Beasley made with regards to the information that is presented as mitigating actions. Because I think what's clear with regards to this to me, and I'd speak also, I do declare slight interest because I do work for an alternative provider, is just how market led that this sort of area of our work is. And I would like to see it come back to actually it really needs to be more children and young people centred, and that when packages of care are put out, they go out into the marketplace and providers are invited to bid for that piece of work. There doesn't seem to be any control over the pricing or charging in the same way perhaps that is done within adult social care. So I would like to see it reflected in that risk, in that dialogue in terms of actions to mitigate the risk, that we are actually taking actions to have a bit more of an influence on the market and to invite micro providers into the market, and to sort of really take a bit more control of the pricing and the charging of the services, because it seems to me that that is missing at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. You're positive noted. Councillor Trent, then we'll move on.
Yeah, I just really wanted to add a comment to that because we're in the process, well, a number of us, I lobbied our local MP when we met with her a few weeks back, that maybe that's something which could be added to the lobbying thing, because it's okay saying there's a problem, but actually if we present them with solutions, and that sounds like something which I've got a feeling that you're not able to do it at the moment, that the law doesn't sort of do that, but it might actually be one simple solution that doesn't cost anything that the government could put into the system, because the system is broken. But even if the finances were found and sorted out, the problem that has created the deficit is still there. So it needs to be modified as a system. So it would be very useful if we had things like this, which I think was actually quite a useful point to use in our collective lobbying of our local MPs and so on, and feedback from officers to government, that we actually say, this is how the system could be made to work.
Okay, Adam.
Chair, I think my suggestion would be to ask Fiona to reflect on the conversation with the Corporate Director of Children's Services, so that next time you see this risk, it can reflect about what can and can't be done with regards to that point that being raised, and so that if there is any opportunity of further lobbying, then we can consider whether that would be an appropriate issue on which to focus any of that lobbying on.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, we've given risk management good airing this evening. It's a recommendation that we note this quarterly report. So Councillor Fitch.
Sorry, I know you. I
Yeah.
don't want to ask any more questions. I just would like to know, or just clarification as to how we're going to get the feedback. There's a lot of points been raised tonight, and it has been said, oh yes, we'll look at that, or we'll come back to you on that, or whatever. Are we going to get something before the next meeting? Is all this just coming back at the next meeting? I just like clarification. Thanks.
Well, I think Fiona's probably got to talk to a couple of members, and independent members particularly, about their queries, because and yes, it might be useful to have some feedback before the next meeting. And if Fiona wants some clarification on some of the points some of the members have raised, could you email them direct and say, look, let's have a chat, so a bit more. So I'm asking that, and Fiona, I think, is nodding, so we can do that. So it's a report to note, item 8, and Fiona, thank you for all your work that you put into preparing it, and also your colleague as well. So we'll move on now to item 9 on the agenda, health and safety and fire safety. It's an annual report. I've got Rebecca Lowry on health and safety, and also Philip Lawrence, who I think is joining us online, reference fire safety. So I don't know which of the two are going to present first. So over to you two. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Gosh, not used to this. Evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. I'll cover the health and safety section of the annual health and safety and fire safety report, and then I'll pass over to my colleague Phil Lawrence online to cover the fire safety section. Chair, I'll leave it to you to decide on when questions are raised, if that's okay. So the health and safety and fire safety governance framework continues to be embedded and is working effectively. On page 132 of the report, section paragraph 3, there's a helpful infographic which details the flow diagram of the actual framework itself. The Health and Safety and Fire Safety Board continues to meet quarterly, and part of this meeting incorporates a review of the corporate risk register at every quarterly meeting. Our new Chief Operations Officer is currently reviewing the information and reporting considered by the board at this meeting to ensure it remains effective and incorporates the changing nature of our services, colleagues, buildings and other assets. Whilst the corporate health and safety team have been depleted in number slightly, we're continuing to successfully manage our reactive work, such as accident investigations, the provision of advice, guidance and support to colleagues, which also includes updating our policies and procedures following emerging trends identified by any investigations that we might have, and within the council and wider best practice guidance. Unfortunately, some of the more proactive work that was planned will be undertaken at a slower speed than which we'd initially hoped. This, however, has been positive in meaning that our inspection documents have been reviewed and will focus now on the higher risk nature of the activities that have been identified rather than the more generic format of previous years. The development of our cautionary contact system in-house is ongoing. In the interim, the cautionary contact list, which is a database of all persons who have acted in an aggressive or violent manner and could pose a significant risk to our council colleagues, has been amalgamated into one system, making it administratively less cumbersome than previously. And now one system has replaced the previous 3. The system is accessible to all colleagues and seems to be working effectively. I'd like to draw your attention to paragraph 20. This gives a screenshot of our intranet landing page. I appreciate that sometimes the links within these documents don't always work, but if councillors would like to view our landing page on the internal intranet and are having any difficulties, then please do reach out to me and I'll endeavour to help you access these documents. We have a legal requirement as an employer to make accident reports to the Health and Safety Executive if there's a incapacitation of a colleague for more than 7 days or reduced duties. These reports also apply to members of the public who are taken from the scene of a workplace accident directly to hospital. There are other reporting parameters within the RIDDOR guidance or RIDDOR regs, which I won't go into. These are the very simplified version. Since the last Audit and Governance Committee, there have been 29 such RIDDOR reports reported by Corporate Health and Safety to the HSE, which covers a timescale of 5 quarters. For a comparative purpose, the number of reports in 2022 for the calendar year was 17, for 2023 was 18, and for 2024 to date is currently 19. The majority of these reports relate to slips, trips and falls and moving and handling incidents. The majority of these reports also fall within our Environment Directorate, who have a large number of public-facing colleagues working out and about within the conurbation. That's the end of my report. However, I would just like to refer you to paragraph 51 on page 139. There is a link to our health, safety and welfare policy. Again, an internal link. Hopefully it would work if you do click on it. However, as before, if you do struggle, then please do reach out to me and I'll endeavour to help you gain access to it. Happy to either take questions or pass over to my colleague Phil. Up to you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I think we'll deal with questions at the end. Philip Lawrence, if you could do your presentation on fire safety. Philip.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present this report to you this evening. Progress has continued this past year to ensure the safety of BCP Council operated buildings and facilities regarding fire risk. While our governance framework has proven effective, like all governance frameworks, a robust commitment must remain to fuel further progress. Attendance at our Health and Safety and Fire Safety Board meetings remains strong, with the newest members adding worthwhile and focused discussions. This level of participation ensures issues are addressed. Legislation, such as the Building Safety Act, has introduced new duty requirements. Our diligent fire risk assessment process and continued investments in fire detection, compartmentation and training assist in meeting these. The Grenfell Tower Inquiry's Phase 2 report, which was released last month in September, marks a significant milestone in the industry's collective endeavour for fire safety within the housing sector, and BCP Council is committed to translating its recommendations into tangible improvements. A key structural enhancement this year was the unification of our fire safety support functions. As of the 1st of September, BCP Homes and the corporate fire safety functions have now been reorganised under one management team, which assists in streamlining the service's vision, thus bolstering our response capabilities across the council for corporate and housing properties. We've standardised the intervals for which our fire risk assessment renewals and reviews take place across BCP Homes housing stock, which brings a uniform approach to the service delivery. And our investment in people continues. The fire safety team continues to provide periodic training for those appointed as local fire safety coordinators. Once trained, they're included into our local fire safety coordinators forum for those appointed persons to share lessons learned and create a community to minimise a feeling of isolation within the role. Our policy and procedures undergo periodic review and are readily accessible for BCP colleagues. Several policies are currently in draft and once approved will be distributed directly to the local fire safety coordinators alongside the usual distribution channels, making them available to all BCP colleagues. In conclusion, our commitment to fire safety governance continues and we adapt to existing and emerging challenges. As a service, we look forward with a focus on continual improvement, and I'm open to take any questions when you choose to, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Looking around the room for anybody wanting to ask questions. One thing which I mentioned during the pre-meeting, and it's been in the media this week, is Martin's Law, which links into the Manchester bombing, named after one of the people who very sadly passed away due to that event. And it's something which, some legislation which is yet to be formally introduced. I wonder whether either the two officers can make comment about that and how that's being processed, because obviously, though it's not law yet, it's obviously something that we as a council should be mindful of.
There is a council working group on Martin's Law. So as they're reviewing the progress of the legislation and will act accordingly.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Tommy?
Yeah, just obviously, does that fall into Sophie Saget's remit as well then? Because I understand that's sort of part of that remit, I would have thought.
Mr. Stannard?
Yeah, the working group is led by Amanda Barry, which is she's the head of corporate operations. But Sophie has a membership or a representative of Sophie's team is also on that working party.
Obviously, as when that law comes in and regulations are made thereunder, it's something which potentially even licensing committee will have to absorb in giving commissions for various events. So we had that presentation. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I just wanted to ask, and I think I posed a similar question at Audit and Governance in the same cycle this time last year. In view of where we are in the budget process, I wondered whether the officers, both in terms of fire safety and in terms of health and safety, could give an assurance that they are staffed to the necessary level and that they're not being put under financial constraint, which may prevent that happening in the future. It's a question I've asked, and I asked of myself when I was formerly leader of Bournemouth Council on a regular basis, because it is only too easy for it to be swept up, both health and safety and fire safety, in the council's need to save money. And of course, it's two areas where the council can never afford to make any compromises.
Thank you for that observation. Mr. Stannard?
Can I speak for health and safety, because it comes under what my wider team. Bex alluded to in the presentation that we did make a one full-time equivalent saving in the 24-25 budget round. In reality, that post was not filled in 23-24, so we've been running without that post for 2 years. We, as an officer, we wouldn't have made the recommendation to Cabinet on a needs must basis, accepting, you know, the financial position of the council. So the elements of work that we would not be doing as a result of taking that post out were clearly laid out in that document, and council made the decision to accept the recommendation to take that post out. Just to be clear, what it's not doing is not taking away our immediate operational response, but it is some of the more proactive work that we were hoping to do. It's at a slower pace or a more risk focused pace. There's always an impact of taking resource out, but that's the truth of the matter.
Thank you for that. Okay, it was this, Councillor Beasley.
Well, Chairman, we've heard about the health and safety. I was rather hoping that Mr. Barton could answer on the fire safety side.
You comment on the fire safety side, please, Mr. Lawrence.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So since I occupied the role of Fire Safety Service Manager on the 1st of September of this year, part of my initial duty is actually to have a look at a holistic approach of what resources we have across the corporate and housing fire safety services to get an appreciation of are there any gaps in resources we will need to fill, and if there will be any budget pressures due to that. That work is ongoing, and I'll be able to update this committee moving forward at an interval of your choosing on the outcome of that.
Councillor Tully.
Yeah, I've got to declare an interest because I'm related to somebody that's just done their BCP fire marshal training. Yeah, maybe if we encourage more training, it would be a worthwhile thing. Thank you.
That point will be noted by Mr. Lawrence. Thank you for that. Anyway, it's a report to note. Thank you for all the time and effort that you put in preparing it for us. And certainly next year, when you come back, the Martins Law will be embedded, and we can hear more about the new procedures and everything that's been learned from that. So, Councillor Connolly.
I have a quick question? I'm not sure. I'm a bit unclear as to the role of A&G with scrutinising the fire safety practices themselves, or rather the governance around them. So if I wanted to get some assurance that everywhere in my ward, for example, all the blocks of flats were accessible from a fire safety perspective and accessible from, is here the appropriate forum to be asking questions like that, or is here more scrutinising the governance, if that makes sense? Should we be asking questions around the fire safety of blocks of flats, for example, in our wards? That might be one for the monitoring officer or you.
Excuse me. Did I break that link then? So no. The role of audit and governance is primarily governance matters, but of course I would anticipate that Phil Lawrence, if you had a more detailed question, outside of the committee environment, that Phil Lawrence would be able to answer that on an operational level. Am I right with that, Phil?
Yes, you are, Nigel. Happy to answer any questions in all the detail I can provide outside of this. I'd welcome it, actually.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I'd be in touch. Just didn't want to be overlapping with one of the scrutiny committees who are also asking the same sorts of questions. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We got effectively two recommendations there. Firstly, obviously, to note the reports and presentations that we've just received, but recommendation B, I'll read it out because you should note it. Health and safety and fire safety ongoing governance arrangements updates continue to be reported annually to the A&G committee. So, we would want that to be done. And clearly, if there's anything particularly that needs to be reported prior to 12 months' time, then that can be brought to our attention. So we would concur with that. So that's agreed. Thank you very much. So we're now moving on to item 10 on the agenda. That is emergency planning and business continuity annual update. So again, it's another annual report, and we can welcome Alison Whitley, the emergency planning manager, who's joining us online. And can we have your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee. Before I actually just give my presentation or overview of my report, the Martins Law was just mentioned in relation to fire safety and health and safety. I just wanted to add that emergency planning is obviously very much involved in that as well, because it's about the preparation of reports and plans for buildings. So it covers multiple disciplines across the organisation, but we're very much involved in that. And obviously it came from the Manchester Arena attack, in fact, so something we're very much involved in. So just wanted to update the committee on that as well, as it's not actually mentioned in my current report. Okay. So this is the Emergency Planning and Business Continuity Annual Monitoring Report. So it focuses on the period from November 2023 to October 2024. And it addresses the activity and governance in relation to how the council has been meeting its statutory duties under the Civil Contingencies Act. So the introduction to the report actually is a bit of a reminder in terms of the context that we undertake those activities and the duties and our obligations to work not only as an organisation, as a Category 1 responder, but working in the multi-agency context. So a lot of the activity undertaken is very much not just as a standalone organisation, but within that wider local resilience forum, the partnership that we have to work within. So overall, sort of looking at nationally and locally, one of the key issues within the period that has been raised in the report has been resourcing within my own emergency planning and resilience team. We are a small team, and we have been until very recently for over a year with only 50% resource. So that obviously has had an impact on delivery of activity, and it has meant we've had to be somewhat more reactive than proactive than we would have liked to have been. But we have now been joined by 2 new team members. So we are very much looking to reprioritise and get back up to speed and deliver some of those areas of work where we've not been able to progress as much as we would like. That said, it's still been a really busy period and we've made good progress in some really key areas of work. As is mentioned within the emergency planning update, so section 24, moving on, we actually secured funding from the LRF partnership for additional resource to focus on an area known as human aspects. So this is how we very much treat people following an incident, from the short-term needs, practical needs, to the long-term psychosocial support. So we've been joined since May with a team member looking to address gaps in our multi-agency capability there. We've made some really good progress. And actually a couple of the recommendations that have come out of the Grenfell public inquiry report, we were already ahead of the game there. And so we're looking to implement some of the changes that have been recommended through Grenfell and how we address the human aspects response. So that's been a real positive over the period. The other sort of key thing that was mentioned in paragraph 27, we mentioned exercise Elios. At the time of finalising this, the actual 2-day exercise had not taken place. We were about to embark on it. Part of our duties is not only preparing plans, but it's making sure we practice, we rehearse those plans, we train with those other people who would be responding with. So we'd spent a year and a half planning a live exercise for 2 days that looked at one of our high risks for Dorset, which is coastal flooding. And we spent a day focused on the response side of things, and then another day as a workshop in-person session looking at recovery. And that was a really successful exercise. We had over 30 members of staff from BCP attended that, and it's an opportunity we rarely get to focus on recovery. We tend to focus on those immediate few hours of response, but the recovery is when the responsibility hands over to the local authority to actually lead, and how we help our communities to recover. So that was a really successful event and very much improving our resilience. So there are some of the key activity, and also a third development is in relation to community resilience. So this is how we enable our communities to be more prepared, so they are more resilient in the face of an emergency, and actually they can sort of bounce back following a range of incidents that could happen. And we are looking, we're working some joint working with communities, and we are going to have a part-time post for an officer who can focus on going out into our communities and enabling them to develop their own community emergency response plans. So lots of activity, really positive activity, taking forward our responsibilities in terms of our preparation, our ability to respond, and actually helping to develop more resilient communities as well. So they have been the key focus of activity across the organisation. And in terms of our governance arrangements, we have 2 levels. We have a board and a forum, so a more strategic sort of tactical group and a more tactical operational group, and those have continued to meet successfully. They both meet quarterly, and they're pan organisation, and they're looking at monitoring resilience activity, and then looking at some of that multi-agency and across organisational planning. So the sorts of things we look at: how prepared are we to deal with a cyber attack? And we've seen numerous local authorities who've experienced those. So we talk about our preparation and how we can be prepared for that sort of incident. Okay.
Okay. Was that your, yep. Yeah, fine. I've got a couple of quick queries myself, emanating from what you said there. Obviously, you don't know what sort of emergency is going to crop up. It could be literally anything could happen. And you know, one thing that happened 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was particularly hot weather, or was it people setting fire to things on Camden Heath when there was fires? Much of the heath was unfortunately destroyed, and I think there were some issues then in communicating with councillors or ward councillors what was happening, what was going on, because obviously a lot of people do contact ward councillors because they do, or they do have ability to communicate via Facebook and things like that. And do you have that, say, in your phone or in your team, whereby you can update ward councillors so they can actually act as a conduit for communicating with residents what's happening? Because obviously, if an event happens, it's literally all hands on deck. But I think there was an issue with the fire on Camford Heath, of actually communicating to the councillors what you wanted onward transmitted to the residents.
So yes, we have several tiers of response. So we have operational, tactical, and strategic, and we have officers on call at those levels. So it's an activity that's our sort of tactical or strategic officers who are part of that response would be conducting that liaison with members and making sure they're kept informed of what's going on. So that's very much embedded in our plans. And there is also an ongoing piece of work with democratic services to make sure we have those up-to-date contact details. So not only in office hours, but out of hours, we can contact councillors as well.
Okay, and the other observation before being Council Tarling, many years ago, I was on another council, and they even were planning some form of emergency event where they actually asked the councillors to volunteer to be some of the injured people. I just wonder whether, if that event occurs again and you are looking for volunteers rather than going just merely to staff, I think the councillors might like to get involved, because they should learn as well what happens, because you're planning for these things. And I think the councillors should know more about these events, because I think they do happen. You do dummy events, dummy tragedies or fires or whatever. Like Mr. Stannard, I believe, is involved as well. So it's something to bear in mind. That's more of a statement than a question. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, you're offering to be a dummy, Mr. Chair. That's very interesting. No, sorry, just tickled me. Funny you should mention Camford, because I was going to mention Valentine's Day and flooding in my ward that happened a few years ago, and certainly Councillor Phipps probably also has a bit of a ward that her ward that floods. Just interested in the local resilience forum. I have I've worked in some places where I have input with other local authorities and other LRFs, and one of the key stakeholders in LRF is quite often specialist stakeholders such as oil refineries, ports, and so on. So first thing, I'd just like to know sort of what the LRF is made up from, or an idea of the membership in BCP. And secondly, just regarding sort of flood warning, some local authorities where they have a very high risk facility nearby, be that a port, nuclear facility, oil refinery, they have a text notification scheme, and whether that's something that we have. I know there's a UK-wide government text emergency scheme, but is that something that we could do locally? Thank you.
Can you comment on that?
Would you like me to?
Yes, I'll answer that bit about the text messages and how we can communicate better, perhaps.
So we don't currently have a facility to a local facility. Yes, we have the national facility under the National Emergency Alerts that we can make use of. And that decision will be made through the local resilience forum as part of response. But we don't have a current capability to broadcast a message to the whole of our community using a text message. I mean, obviously, there are things that can be done slightly slower time, but not an immediate. But some of those things you mentioned in terms of oil refineries and witch farm coma, they are part of the legislative requirements through coma and other the nuclear regulations, that the public information zone, so that has to be done as part of the planning. We don't actually have any of those facilities, so we don't actually have those legal responsibilities to be able to do that. So we have a slightly different risk picture.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Trent, you indicated.
Yeah, it's going back to the informing local councillors. If I go back 15 to 20 years and we did have things happen, if there was an incident in the ward I represent, which is part of what I represent now, we would know about it, even down to there being a house fire which happens late in the evening, and we knew about the evacuation procedures and had the option of joining the residents in their evacuation, at their location of evacuation, within 2 or 3 hours. And now, a lot of what happens, we actually read about it the next day in the paper, or we hear about it second or third hand from people, or comments on WhatsApp and so on. And I do think that's an area which needs to be looked at. I think because your first port of call in a community has to be those who are involved directly, and councillors are a conduit to information. People at one time would contact us and saying what's going on. I think they've given up because we don't know what's going on a lot of the time, because we don't get the information which we used to do. But I sort of feel that's something that needs looking at. We need a protocol whereby if there's a major incident within a ward, that the relevant 2 or 3 ward councillors for that area know about it as soon as anyone else knows about it. And and this informing, the police were involved in it as well. The police would sort of tell us whether there was a major incident, and all of that just seems to have gone by the wayside, even though we've actually got more technology to aid these communications. But the other point I wanted to make actually is about cyber attack, because that's one thing which worries me a lot, and I kind of think that things might come to a head over the next couple of months with the US presidential elections. It seems to me that we are likely to suffer cyber attacks from certain quarters, and I think we need to have a sort of a continuity arrangement there. I think that's one of the most likely things that could happen to us, simply because whatever happens in the American presidential election, I think it's going to change the dynamics. And I think places like the UK and any vulnerable part of the UK system is going to be subject to cyber attacks, as many parts of our system have been subject already. We've had the NHS attacked and so on. So I do think that that's actually a major concern, and I'm sort of wondering whether there's a plan B in place to cope with that, and to kind of carry on business as normal, even if our sort of technology has fallen down.
Okay, thank you for that. Got a couple of other people wanted to speak. Councillor Phipps next.
Yeah, I was also going to raise the issue of what used to happen. Councillor Trent's already mentioned that, was it 20 years ago or whatever, councillors would actually know what was going on. That's true. Because whilst I wasn't necessarily a major councillor at that time, as such in Christchurch, I've been on the parish council and chairman of it for a long time as well. Since 1995, I've been on the parish council. And we actually had a flood warden who was there and was told if there was an issue with flooding. Now, we do have parishes, we do have town councils within BCP. And I think communication is the key with all of this. And it's not just, I believe, BCP councillors. I think it should go to chairman of parish and town councils as well. That's what people need to know, what is going on, or they can't actually be of any assistance at all. And it seems to me that we don't have the facility to do texts or to communicate with anybody. I think that's what you said. Just seems a bit of a backward step. We've got these great plans and all these things going on, but we're not actually telling anybody what's going on. And I think that does need looking at, actually. So that's what I'd like to suggest, that we do get that, something like that included within this procedure.
Okay, we've got Lindy indicating next to ask questions.
My question relates specific to the business continuity preparedness, not the emergency planning. So I've got a couple of questions on that. I see you were busy with the BIA impact assessment, but I couldn't see whether you did any DR testing on emergency, and The second question is whether BCP had any disruptions during the year that you were looking at, October to November to October this year, if there were any disruptions, and what the lead time is for BCP in that effect. And then also just to give more information on the communication of the BCP. Is the plan updated with the latest key officials that should act in disaster recovery mode? And if you do get the plan, is it easily retrievable? And do you regularly communicate to officials so that they know exactly what to do in the event of a disaster?
Alison, could you comment on those three people who have spoken?
Yes, I shall try and remember all those questions. I can give some general answers, but some more specifics I might have to go away and provide more detail. Because in terms of disaster recovery, that's quite specifically about IT recovery. And so I would need to speak to IT colleagues about the actual detail of that. But overall, we do have a council cyber response plan, which looks at how we would the actual command and control, so the structures, how we would manage that, and the different roles and responsibilities, which we did do a small test of. It was probably about 18 months ago. And it is a topic that we keep on addressing and trying to get services to do tests of small areas of that in terms of their own business continuity. In terms of the business actually DR or incidents for business continuity, there are no significant ones that I am aware of that we as an emergency planning team have been involved in as part of the corporate response. So it's possible there may have been some minor ones within services that we were not aware of that had a limited impact, but there haven't been any in terms for BCP Council during the reporting period. We did in the previous year, but not in this period. And the question in relation to BIA's business impact assessment. So those are reviewed periodically, supposed to be reviewed annually across each service, has its own looking at its own service delivery, what its critical functions are, and then it's planning for how it would then respond. So whilst we might lose ICT as a result of a cyber attack, business continuity is one of our statutory obligations. So services have to look at what are the critical things we need to deliver, and actually how could we do that if we did lose ICT. So they have workarounds to be able to still deliver the really critical elements of service. It may not be the same as it had been before the cyber attack for a period, but they would still deliver the really critical aspects of their service.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tolley, you indicated?
Yeah, I've just sent Councillor Phipps information on how to become a community flood warden. So we were contacted, certainly Christchurch Town Council, we were contacted about trying to rally some councillors to become flood wardens. And I must admit, I said no, but perhaps Councillor Phipps, if there's an email there, I've just sent you, so you can always pick that up.
Just to say thank you very much. Yeah, I'm surprised. I didn't know that they were still around, but it used to be the council that organised like flood wardens, but now it looks as like it's a different organisation. We still have someone who was our flood warden when it was working. I'm sure he would do it again.
Still around.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. What I would say, communicating with people, you're talking about text messages and things like that. A lot of people now take information, news or gossip even from Facebook groups, and there's 3 in my ward that dissipate news about whatever roadworks or whatever, and there must be in councils here, you've probably got a particular Facebook group that dominates your ward, or 1 or 2. It's something that perhaps the officers might like to bear in mind, that, and again, you don't know where this emergency is going to occur next, that you do get to know, perhaps by actually talking to the 75, now shortly to be 76 councillors, what are the principal Facebook groups covering their wards, because you might need in Highcliffe to communicate to as many people as possible in Walkford, but you don't know which Facebook group to put the information onto. And it's something where the councillors actually might think, well, actually, yes, good, they do know how to get some information out quick if needed. So that's a suggestion I can make. Mr. Stannard.
Can I just quickly respond to an element of Councillor Tarling's earlier question? I think he asked what the broad membership of the Dorset LRF was. So just to be clear, the Dorset LRF is the geographical area of Dorset covering Dorset Council and BCP Council. And as you would expect, all the blue lights are part of the Local Resilience Forum, as well as entities like the Environment Agency. Also, depending on what the incident is, there are utility companies that can be called in and water companies, etc. So HM Coast Guard, I know it's a blue light, but some people don't necessarily see it as a blue light all the time. So they're another member of the LRF.
Thank you for that. We've got a recommendation here, which I will read out so that people listening online. Recommended Energy Committee note the emergency planning and business activity continuity that's been taking place over the monitoring period. B, note issues that have been taken reference planning team more widely regarding resource and impact that has had on the service delivery and the potential impact for response. And C, note the current resilience position locally and nationally and the implications of this with regard to future expectations of local authorities and their level of preparedness. So we'll note that and accept your report, and thank you for your presentation. Thank you very much. And that concludes item 10. We've got 2 or 3 more items. I don't think if anybody needs a comfort break, if you can indicate, but hopefully we can move on and conclude the agenda. So the next item is item 11, internal audit, second quarter 2024-2025 audit plan update. And Mr. Stannard, you're presenting this.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So progress on the delivery of the 24-25 audit plan is going well. The team is currently at full establishment and will be until January 25. Just when you think things are going great, I've had a resignation this week, which is at audit manager level. They've been successful at gaining a significant promotion with a county council in the east of England, so good for them, not so good for us. Having said that, the implications of a not full establishment in the final quarter are subsumed within our audit plan. So we do sort of budget, if you like, plan for an element of not full establishment for the year. So I don't have any negative views around whether that lack of resource for the final quarter will have a significant impact. Paragraph 3 shows that 14 audit assignments have been completed in the quarter. Please remember we are now posting the full internal audit report, which are finalised in each quarter on the day of the committee to the Microsoft Teams site that you all have access to. I have agreed with Lindy earlier that posting those on the day of the audit committee isn't very helpful if you wanted to look at anything significantly in advance. So what I endeavour to do is post those on the day the agenda is published in future, so you have about a week to look at those. So members are free to look at all, some or none of those, depending on your preference. And please remember that questions on detail, please feel free to ask those outside of the committee. I may not be able to answer them in committee because they may contain certain exempt or confidential information, or I just don't have access to all of that in my brain. You know, there's a lot of recommendations in 14 audit reports. So as required by the committee, as approved in the audit charter, those audits where a partial assurance opinion exists, they've been further outlined in paragraph 4, where the key issues have been identified. Elsewhere in the report, I'm happy to report that the SPT, the single person discount pilot project, this is at paragraph 9, has now identified and recovered over £500,000 worth of inaccurate council tax payments. and there's no significant slow up in the rate or values of those SPDs identified. Elsewhere in the report, we've been doing grant certification work required by the government. These have been completed mainly in this quarter, and that's all explained at paragraph 14, and the grants total roughly 9.5 million. Please note paragraph 16 to 18, which explains that the Investigatory Powers Commission Office, IPCO, have conducted their usual 3-year inspection of BCP Council's RIPA policy and our operational arrangements. RIPA, remember, standing for Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, where we do or not do covert surveillance. Remember also that the policy is agreed by this committee and you receive an annual report also on that. The IPCO inspection was successfully navigated, and the outcome is shown at Appendix 1 to the report. Elsewhere, the implementation of audit recommendations by management remains good. Paragraph 21 explains there are 5 recommendations across 4 audits where the recommendations have not been completely implemented by their originally approved date. Management explanations for these delays appear reasonable to me, but committee is reminded that if you do want to call any officers in, if their explanations in Appendix 2 are not sufficient or sufficiently clear, you can call those officers in to explain why those recommendations aren't implemented. At that point, Chair, happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. Looking around the room.
I have one. I noticed that 3 schools, it notes emerging risk deficit set for 2024-25. I recall at full council the other day, one of the papers related to, I can't remember which paper it was exactly, but it definitely cited an increase in school reserves as being one of the arguments for the transfer to the designated school grant budget. Maybe that's one to follow up, but it would be useful to know, because I definitely remember in one of the papers it cited school reserves increasing, and I'd like to sort of see how that squares with 3 of these, with the emerging risk of a deficit coming in. It might just be that they're talking to different time periods or something.
No, Vice Chair, they're not. But there are 16 maintained schools, maybe 15 now, depending on the status of one that's. There's 15 maintained schools that we do audit. The general synopsis is as per the report that you mentioned, that reserves are generally going up, but for those 3 that we've audited, and coincidental that it's the 3 that we've audited this year, their reserves are at such a level where this is an issue for those 3. There may be other schools that are tilting towards that, but there are significant reserves in some of the other schools.
Thank you.
Councillor Tony?
Yeah, did you mention something about single person discount breaches and 60? Is that 62,000 breaches? Was it? Did I mishear?
Right. Thank you, Danny. No, I said the single person discount project has now yielded nearly over £500,000 worth of extra council tax yield as a result of us removing single person discounts that were claimed fraudulently or in error.
Yeah, come back.
And did we establish what those errors were? Was there a trend done in that analysis where they were coming from?
I can simplify grossly. People are very quick at telling the council they are single, and therefore they take the discount. but they're not so quick at telling us they've moved on or moved on with another partner, and there's now another adult in the property. And that's where our NFI, National Fraud Initiative, data matching comes in, where things like the electoral roll and credit reference agency checks highlight that there's 2 adults living in the property where we're told there was only 1.
And that £550,000, that's money that's been collected from the 1st of April last year. And is it a figure that's going to carry on £500,000 each year, or is it sort of a one-off?
No, it's not from the 1st of April this year. It's from broadly October last year when we started the pilot. So we've roughly been running 12 months. Of the 550,000, about 300,000 is ongoing. 250,000 is backdated unpaid council tax that we are allowed to go back. We're allowed to go back 7 years, and if you know, they very rarely go back 7 years, but we could in theory, and we're allowed to collect that council tax in arrears, so to speak.
Okay, thank you for that. Lindy.
I've got a question on the report on housing assets, health and safety compliance. The follow-up. I'm quite concerned about the issues that was raised with regards to the water hygiene, lift safety and fire safety. The implementation date by management is end of March 2025, and I just wanted to have an indication of how serious these incidents are, because it can lead to legal penalties and fines and sanctions. So it can have a detrimental effect. The timeline of 31st of March, is that close enough? Meaning that in the interim, do we have processes in place so that nothing, until it can be completely rectified at the end of March, that nothing will go wrong in regards to these issues highlighted in the report?
Mr. Stowart.
Yeah, thank you, Lindy, for raising it. I sort of had this very much in my mind because I thought this would be of course, this is not good. Nobody can dispute that. Some of the dates are realistic and pragmatic because the activity, procurement activity, and then work activity needs to take place to rectify some of these issues. So we might prefer them to be done quicker, but there is an element of real life and reality here. So what has happened in the interim, therefore, is that the service, where, for example, there might need a workaround or a temporary solution to make safe, that's the operational responsibility of the manager to make sure that's in place. I'm confident that that is there, but yeah, the option here, of course, is for committee on any of these to say, look, we're sufficiently worried about this and we would want a deeper dive or an explanation from the service area to come in and assure us exactly what you're asking there, Lindy, in a bit more detail.
Eleanor?
Sorry to go around again. I've been thinking about what you said about some of the high priority recommendations where the target date for implementation is being pushed out. I see the first one is housing BCP Homes Governance Review, and the original target date was last January. I'm wondering what the committee thinks about maybe this coming January asking for the director to come in and talk about it, because that would be a year after the initial target date for implementing that. I'm conscious of the pressure that officers are under and everything, and I'm sure there's very good reasons for it, but I feel like a year after the original implementation date seems like a reasonable time to ask, at least for an update from the team. Sort of a proposal, I guess.
I think the revised target date is the 31st of the 12th this year. So if they didn't meet that target, I would be recommending to committee exactly what you've said, because that would be a second failure to meet the target date. And you're right, this needs to be sorted within 12 months, so there's very definitely an explanation. But I'm very hopeful, having looked at this and asked for an update before this committee, that they're on target and they should reach that 31st of the 12th deadline.
Can I just come back on that then? Perhaps could we have an update after the 31st? Because I see all of them have an end of this year implementation date. So perhaps we could have an update in January as to which ones have slipped.
Absolutely, you get that routinely. So if any of these continue, as I say, it will be my recommendation that you do call in and ask for an explanation, frankly. But I haven't gone through the others in a fine-tooth comb to understand whether they're on target. What we normally do in terms of overall process is a month before the target date, we send a reminder to say, manager, remember this target date is coming up in a month's time. What, are you going to meet it? Can you tell us in advance if you're going to meet it? Do you need any other information or any other elements? So it doesn't, in other words, it doesn't creep up on the manager without them knowing. We flag it.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Solly, then we'll move on.
Yeah, I was going to answer Councillor Connolly's, just ask the committee what we thought of it. And I think it's a very good idea, but I think Mr. Senna actually probably answered it. I think that the fact that there's a timing of notification, information gathering, report writing, and the timing, I think, is quite important of when we would get the service director or the head of who's being audited in. It would be after that report. There's no point doing it before or during. So there would be a process whereby we would receive, I would assume, Mr. Sannel's report, and then and whether that would be something that Mr. Chair, you could do as part of your pre-meets, and determine if that is a point upon receipt of the papers that you take a view on whether that head of service should be in to respond directly. Okay.
Thank you. Because when would the next quarterly report not come to committee? This is the second quarter. We're due to have a meeting at the end of January, which is like the brought forward meeting, so it could be at that one potentially. Fine.
Chair, I'm really sorry. Can I just be clear? Is this if any of the target dates have slipped, or is it in relation to the first one on housing where that end date will have been exceeded that you would?
Mr. Stannard, can you explain?
Thanks.
I think I know I have a professional duty to raise with you and tell you if the date's been, the first date has slipped. That's what this appendix does. If the second date slips, I would be pointing that out very explicitly in this report, saying, I think you should, as a committee, call this officer in and explain why this audit recommendation has not been implemented for 2 agreed target dates.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we've got a recommendation here which I'll read out for those listening. A, note progress made and issues arising on the delivery of the 24-25 internal audit plan, and B, note the explanations provided in Appendix 2 and determine, in the case of high priority recommendations highlighted, if further explanation and assurance from the service stroke corporate director is required. Well, we've made comments about that, and we're going to get some feedback on some of those issues which people have picked up. So okay, that's item 11, because we've noted the report. Thank you, Mr. Stallard, on that. Item 12, this is the annual report of the internal audit, counter fraud work and whistleblowing referrals 2023-2024. There are some exempt papers obviously with this, and although obviously members are privy to those documents, if anybody wants to particularly refer to that or those items, we will have to go below the line and go offline. exclude the public from the meeting. So hopefully we won't need to do that. But Mr. Stannard, again, this is your report. If you could present it to us, please.
Sorry. Thank you. I will tackle that issue right at the end of what I have to say, just to give members another option. So before we dive into this report too much, I just wanted to make two key introductory points. The first point is that every alleged or identified fraud or financial irregularity, however small, is proportionately investigated by internal audit, or it's agreed with management that they will investigate it. And it's also agreed with the chief executive, myself, and the monitoring officer if any external bodies, such as the police, should investigate a matter. Secondly, just to explain why you are receiving an annual report for 23-24, some 7 months after the year end. I found through experience that bringing the report any sooner would mean that quite a high number of the matters, especially in the confidential appendix, are unresolved or still requiring further investigation because of the inherent nature of an investigation and the time it takes. So that's why it's coming to this committee and not one slightly before, which might be more intuitive. So moving to the report and to highlight certain key points. So paragraph 3, under the strategic heading, the method of evolving the key policies to prevent and detect fraud or error continues to work well, keeping the policies up to date and fresh. So I do propose to continue bringing the policies to the committee for annual approval. And this is indeed factored into the committee forward plan that we'll look at the last agenda item. On the bottom of page 168, we talk about participation in the National Fraud Initiative, which is mandatory on councils, and then the outcomes of that participation is summarised in the bullet points that follow. Paragraph 4 on page 170 explains the more business as usual ongoing counter fraud work that we do routinely, and you'll note that not exclusively but mainly those are in the housing areas. Paragraph 7 supplies you with the detail of our Transparency Code annual publication covering fraud, and we must publish that on our website in that exact prescribed format. And as the chair alluded to before, I asked for questions. Can I remind the committee that I can answer more general questions, but if you do have any specifics on any of the content of the appendix, please let the chair know, and we'll go into closed session. Or alternatively, you might want to choose to send me an email, and then I can furnish the whole committee with the details and the answer to that particular question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I've got one query which I just noted. Page 171, paragraph 8. There's a table there where you've got the phrase public tip-off in terms of council tax, business rates, blue badges, or whatever. How do those tips come in? Is emails, letters, or is there a facility on the website, or how does that occur?
We have a fraud report it link on the council's website where people can either anonymously or leaving their names. There's a very simple form online, and that's how we get those.
Thank you for that. Any comments or questions from the committee? No. I know you've put ours and all your optimism into preparing this because there's lots and lots of information here, and it's very good what you're doing, and it's fantastic that you are, scrutinising this and protecting us from serious fraud, because in the exempt items there are some things which could have gone wrong, but no, you nipped them in the bud, which is excellent. So thank you, Mr. Sal, and your team. You could pass on my thanks on the committee for what you're doing here, which is protecting the council. So this is basically to note the report. So we accept the report and we note it. We don't need to make any particular decision on that. So moving now on to the final item, the forward plan, refresh for the 2024-25 municipal year. Members want to look up that table. It starts on page 183, and don't forget there's a few sections on page 184 of the agenda. Mr. Tannard, do you want to refer us to any particular items on the agenda? Obviously, the next meeting, as people can see there, is on the 28th of November. Or is that meeting actually going to take place?
Absolutely, Chair. That is one of our what we call the non-core meetings. So confusingly, we've bought what Pete Barber wants to bring into a non-core meeting. Normally, you'll remember that those are reserved for our deeper dive sessions, but because of the way it falls and the timetable that Pete needs to meet, we will be bringing the backstop audit, as alluded to earlier in this agenda, to that committee, and then we'll receive two presentations. They're on the second page, should be page 184, covering the two deeper dives. And then just again to reiterate, the proposal is that this 16th of January meeting will be moved to the Monday, the 27th of January, with everybody's agreement and subject to Democratic confirming that fits the calendar without any cross with other meeting.
So the meeting on the 27th of Feb will stay.
Yep.
Potentially fine. Okay.
Yep.
Has anybody got any questions or queries on the forward plan? No, I think that's adequate. And if, you know, as I said earlier, if once that date for the particular meeting which the Mr. Barber's asked for is sorted, if it could be communicated to the committee, then we can get that in their diary and move on. So that's it. I think, thank you everybody for attending the meeting. It's about 20 to 9. So on that basis, I would close the meeting and thank you for watching.